Hello, everyone. I wanted to go over the study questions for Jonas's The Burden and Blessing of Mortality. Number one, what are the two senses, typo. What are the two senses of mortality that Jonas is working with? Which one does he regard as the burden? Which one does he think is the blessing? This is an important distinction which is made right at the beginning of the essay, and that distinction is between two fundamentally different senses of mortality. And he says here in the first column, two meanings merge in the term mortal, that the creature, so called, can die, is exposed to the constant possibility of death, and that eventually it must die, is destined for the ultimate necessity of death. So, to be mortal means to be exposed to death at every moment. So death is a constant possibility, as he said. And it means to be faced with the ultimate inevitability of death. So we can die in the sense that death is a constant possibility, and we must die. We will die. It is an ultimate inevitability. He continues and says, in the continual possibility, I place the burden. In the ultimate necessity, I place the blessing of mortality. So these two fundamental senses of mortality, the can die and the must die, he believes that the can die is the burden of mortality, and the must die, the ultimate inevitability, is the blessing of mortality. Number two, Jonas claims that the organism must affirm itself. What does he mean by this? Well, you'll remember that Jonas says that the manner of being, the ontology of the organism, is different from everything else in the universe. That the organism, the living thing, lives constantly in peril of death, not just from outside forces that may kill it, but from something going wrong with its own activity, and that is that it has to continue that activity every single moment in the face of death. So every moment of organic life is an effort, which is an avoidance of death. So the organism must constantly affirm itself, affirm its own being. Inanimate objects just sort of sit there, right? Or they do whatever they do, but they don't have to engage in a constant activity to remain the kind of things that they are, whereas the organism does. And this constant activity is a constant affirmation of itself in the face of death. Constant, like a saying yes to itself, you might say. Number three, in discussing whether the struggle for life is worth it, Jonas claims that, quote, almost no amount of misery dims the yes, that would be that self-affirmation, to sentient selfhood. Now, sentient selfhood, that's, kind of big words there, but sentient just means aware, subjectively aware, and selfhood just means being aware of oneself as a thing. So sentient selfhood is what we have. Maybe there's other animals that have awareness of the world and of themselves as persons, but it would seem that he's talking about human beings there. And of course, I say, do you agree? Why or why not? So it's an open-ended question, but it's important to note the kind of question that he's asking, or the kind of problem that he's raising. And that is that to be a living thing means to be exposed to suffering. Being a living thing means that you can be miserable in a way that an inanimate object obviously can't be miserable. Now, number four talks about the double-edged gain, and that's the idea that we have, that because we are subjectively alive, because we are aware, because we have feeling and desire, we have the capacity to feel happiness and joy. But the other side of that is we also have the capacity to experience unhappiness and misery. Jonas has raised the question about really whether being alive is worth it. And he's affirmed that it is. He doesn't give rational foundation for that. I don't think you can. But what he's seen, and this really is a post-Holocaust kind of statement, is that no matter how horrible things get, and how hopeless things get, people tend to affirm themselves. They think that life is worth continuing, and that self-affirmation is worth it, even in the face of the most discouraging and terrible opposition. Finally, number 5. What reasons does Jonas give for mortality being a blessing, and do you find them convincing? Well, I mean, obviously, whether you find them convincing is your own opinion, but what reasons does he actually give? I won't review them because they're very clearly stated at the end of the essay. I would only say that they definitely divide up between social or communal reasons for mortality being a blessing and, on the other hand, individual reasons. The death and what goes along with death, birth, new birth, is necessary for civilization. But he also thinks that for entirely distinct reasons, that it's a blessing for the individual that they don't live forever. So again, there's no reason for me to go over those, but just to emphasize that there's a definite difference between the social and communal reasons he gives for the value of mortality and the individual, or its value for the